Hello and welcome to Money Matters. My name is Busi Mbokazi and today we're talking about training couples, singles and children about money management. To help us unpack this tough conversation, we've got Mr. Mashudu Ravhengani, who is an author but also an elder and a marital counselor. Mr. Mashudu, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Mr. Ravhengani, you've written this book called Unleashing the Marriage Potential, and I'm sure in having to tackle this book alone, you've had to deal with a very critical aspect, which has been money. But now, before we get to being married people, we start off as being singles. And we're fun and we're vibey and we're excited about our lives. But how is it that we should go about as single people navigating the nuances of our financial management?
I suppose that's when we look into the issue of finance management, it has become a very critical issue in our day-to-day life. Generally, if you look into human beings, we talk about your physical, your emotional and spiritual. You can also just as well add the financial, because the issues of finances affects our lives, affects our health, affects our emotions. So therefore, as a single person, it's critical that we learn how to manage our finances and also to manage it well. One of the critical issues that I find, particularly with premarital counseling, has to find how many young people are already heavily indebted by the time they think of getting married. Many of them are already blacklisted, have got many challenges. And if you think about that, they are bringing those financial challenges into the relationship, into marriage, and almost dooming the marriage. Is doomed before it starts because of those problems.
So if I was a single person and I just want to, outside of the context of wanting to get married or doing it for someone else's good. I mean, sometimes as humans we are self-destructive and we would rather take care of someone else than take care of ourselves. How do I then put in place good principles for me to adopt or to start living a financially healthy life as a single person?
I think that's very important. I think one of the things that we realize is that we talk about peer problems of teenagers competing with each other, but even among singles, adults, we find ourselves with the same situation where we are competing with what Busi has, what she drives, where she lives. And because of that, I don't know what her income comes from, even as extra income, but I'm trying to compete with her. And so in many cases, you find that we are get into financial problems because we are trying to impress our friends and so on and so on. So one of the things that is critical for a single person will be contentment, accepting who I am, to realize that it's not the fancy hairstyle, it's not whatever I'm dressing, whatever that makes me a better person. And that's where the issue of accepting God into your life, to say, I am somebody, not because of the applause that I get when I get to church, when I get to work, but because I am created in the image of God.
What are some of the challenges? And I think we've touched a little bit on this. So you've basically pinpointed that it's either we're competing with our peers and not benchmarking for ourselves based on our relationship with God. That's a clear challenge that must be faced by single people. How best do we then combat against that? Because I think it might be simple to say, don't look at the Joneses, but let's talk about the practicalities of that. How do I go about attaining a livable life? I want to live in a place that's not too far from work. I'd like to drive a car that at least is reliable and allows me to get to work. How do I go about making those types of financial decisions as a single person?
I think it starts by having your own priorities right. It starts by having your own plan as a person. I'll give an example. Many of us, when we started working way back then, from the offer letter that we found, we quickly went and got a car, and got a credit card, and overdraft. And I remember this one friend of mine who decided not to have a car. He's actually a teacher. He decided not to have a car for 5 years. And after 5 years, he went and bought a car cash. And now if you think about that, he is saving almost 46% on interest and admin fees and all of those things. But he decided that he's not going to be pressured. He's going to have his own priorities, his own plan, and his own goal in life. And he has been continuing to do that every few years. He takes cash, gets a new car, and he continues. So I think it's about having your own personal plan that is not driven by the friends around, your own goals as a human being.
So in this series, we have discussed and we will discuss financial goals and financial goal setting. Are you saying that that's critical as an individual, getting ready to be married or to form part of a couple, and as a single person, to identify those financial goals for myself?
It is very critical because, as we said, many of us today, you've got people who are depressed because of the wrong financial decisions that they've made. And we're talking about single people. So it therefore becomes very critical that you make your own plan and says, my goal is to buy a property, my goal is to get a car or whatever it is. I'm going to follow through on this plan. And I'm not going to allow, other diversions that comes around. But most importantly, particularly to many of our people, particularly young people, they're not saving. Yes. So we are living on the very edge of our salaries and, saving for the future, saving for an accident. What if I lose income, whatever happens, I lose my job? We don't have plans for that, which is something that you need to factor in as an individual, particularly as a single person, because if you lose a job as a single person, you are in trouble. But maybe those who are married can say, I'll depend on my spouse's salary and you can carry me through. But you are on your own. And that's why it's more important to have a plan, have a savings plan, and making sure that you can sustain yourself.
So now I've managed my single life and someone has found me attractive and has decided to propose marriage.
Yes.
And we must now build this life together. So of course we begin a journey with someone like yourself who does offer premarital counseling. And there's obviously various conversations, but now we then start living together as a couple.
Yes.
That obviously is different, and that requires different strengths. It requires different commitments from both parties. What is the first step or the first thing that couples need to reckon with when they are now preparing to live together forever?
Yeah. So one of the things that we deal with in terms of premarital, we start with premarital counseling. We start by making sure that they communicate in terms of their indebtedness, how each one of them are indebted. And
sorry to cut you off. Yes. Why would we focus on indebtedness? One would think that you would focus on how much does he earn, how much does she earn. Would that not be the first question that's asked?
How much she earns and how much, it's a positive. Because, but we need to start by looking where we don't often look. And that's what we try to say. Look at your debts.
Yes.
Look at how indebted you are and look at your challenges that you have. And one of the things that we do as part of premarital counseling is that we require them to have a balanced budget using their current income, looking at whatever expenditure that they have so that they can combine it together, and they must submit it to me as a counselor.
Okay.
So that I can look that realistically after they're married, they will be able to sustain this life. So we actually enforce that as a part of the preparation for marriage, that they must be able to look into this thing. Because if you look into marriage, most of the time, people are just too excited.
Yes.
They overlook everything else.
They're in love.
They're in love. In fact, the love business is almost like a drug that gets them high and until that wedding day. And one of the things, still talking about that, is that look at something called a wedding day.
Yes.
And the expenses that they do on that one day. And I'm of the view that some of the marriages are destroyed because of the wedding day. So one of the things that we try to encourage our young people to realize is to don't overexpend on one day, feeding people who have got food at home, and impressing people who have seen even better weddings. I mean, there are people, we are talking huge figures that is spent on that one day. And one of the craziest thing I've ever had was a couple getting married in one of these fancy venues. And, you're talking about 100,000 a minimum, in those kind of situations. And I heard from one pastor friend of mine is that the couple didn't even own a car. So with 100,000 Rand minimum, you could have actually just bought yourself a car and go and get married at the church and walk away being married. And so one of the things that we're trying to encourage actually, which is what we do in our ministry, is to encourage that they must try to have simple weddings. Let them, if there is money, put it towards buying a house, to something else into the future of your marriage, instead of spending 300,000 on that one day and end up, living still in that little flat that you were living in before.
So I think the goal setting is then translated from just not only the individual, but then it becomes, when you become a couple, you need to set the goals together.
Exactly.
And then so I think we definitely need to tackle the question, we can do that just a little bit later. This wedding issue, is it that we're spending, I know on average in Southern Africa, the cost for weddings can be R500,000 and in excess. Are we really supposed to be focusing so much on one particular day? What is it that drives us to spend so much money on one day?
And you see, one statement is I often make is that there's no correlation on your size of a wedding day and the success in marriage.
Of your marriage, yeah.
In fact, there can be a negative correlation, because we get indebted in order to have this big one day. And then, as soon as we're married, we start fighting over the debts that we created for that one day. So already marriage is starting on the negative. So there are two issues affecting African weddings, African marriages. Firstly is the lobola business, which has become too expensive, and people are doing crazy things, which is not even inside the culture, because we're talking stories like she's got a master's degree, she's got whatever. So that's another thing that we need to address one day. But secondly, then the wedding day itself, that we are getting ourselves indebted, because we saw Busi's wedding, it was like this and this. I want mine to be better than that one. So I have started talking with young people, and I'm impressed. A few of them who have come through our counseling have done that. I said to them, you can get married on Saturday evening, just after church, during Vespers. And you don't even people don't have to travel again to come to your wedding. While they are there at the church, the pastor comes in the church and bless you, and you go home married. And I was so impressed. I mean, there's one or two couples that have done that, and they got married almost for next to nothing. And all of that money, $500,000 you say, now they can deposit a townhouse, a flat. They can do whatever they want to do with that money and make sure that their marriage is a success.
Yes.
But
I think that we have to focus a little bit on goal setting just after the break. We'll be back after this. Hello and welcome back to Money Matters. My name is Busi Mbokazi and I'm still sitting with Mr. Ravhengani, and we're discussing money and couples, singles, and how to train children with respect to money management. So just before the break, we were speaking a lot about weddings and budgets, and I guess that's the first massive debt that couples get themselves into. So now we're post-wedding day and now we're in the business of marriage. How do couples go about setting financial goals and dealing with their financial management in the course of their marriage?
I think that is very critical. When we look into couples and marriage and how we look into marriage, one of the principles is that each family must have major financial goal. What are we trying to do? Something that makes us to focus on what we're trying to achieve. To some couples it will be, we need to get out of debt. So that's why we're not buying pizza every day or any other takeaways, because we know as a couple we agree on this. And it's important that those priorities are agreed upon by the two of them. It should not just be one person saying this is my goal, another one says this is my goal. We need to focus on doing it together so that becomes what we achieve, and we are proud of it when we achieve. Some are trying to buy a house, whatever goal that it might be, there needs to be those goals so that our budgeting, as we look into it, we can say, okay, we're paying for this and this and this, but here, what remains here is going towards that goal that we're trying to achieve.
So what are some of the advantages of creating a family budget? Because we've obviously, just before the break, we discussed weddings and you know how you can end up in so much indebtedness or so much levels of indebtedness. And let's say that hasn't happened. You were savvy, you've taken Mr. Ravhengani's advice, and we've kept it simple, or we've kept it very minimalistic, or within our actual affordability. So we haven't checked on the Joneses to see what they're doing. So how does it then further benefit us as a family or advantage us as a family to create a budget?
I think it's very critical, because if you think about sometimes people just buy things, you know, I like new sneakers, I'm going to buy them. I saw a dress, there was a sale, I bought that. A budget makes us to prioritize what is important for us as a family. Obviously, we need to pay our rent. If we are renting something, we need to pay for electricity. Start with the major things that needs to be achieved as a family. So we know that those things are done. We have got people who become so excited, get paid, go and have a braai, invite friends, and we enjoy a good time. Second week, we don't have money for transport. We're starting to borrow money for transport. Now, that's where it's critical. The budget starts with what is a priority in the organization, in the family, and focus on those. And then what remains, then we can be able to deal with the minor things of life.
I suppose a family is like an organization.
Of course, it is.
So I suppose then in line with that, then I'll ask this question to say, then should there be, as in an organization, there's a CFO, there's someone who manages the financial account, should there be a specific spouse? Because I know that obviously in certain traditions or certain cultures, one would assume that the man is the head of the household, would then also carry the purse. In some other institutions or in some other cultures, men are happy to believe that women are more savvy and they're more frugal, and they know how to stretch the rand or the dollar or the pound or whatever it may be. So should there be someone who is in charge of the finances in a home?
Yes. Let me put it this way. The role of financial management is jointly for the two of them. And I always encourage newly married couples to say, end of the month, work on it jointly. Start to have a culture of getting both of you involved, to say, whether you're using a joint account or using different accounts, sit together and say, we're paying this, we're paying this, we're paying this. And after you've developed a system that is working, which you both agree on, then one person who is more financial, better to managing things, then can take over and becomes the one. But still, that person must inform the other one if there are anomalies. This time the rent, the electricity was too high, whatever. So that we should not have a situation where a person says there is no money as a surprise. We need to get, because it's the way money is so sensitive, the communication around money is one of the most critical things that we can do as a couple. So even though we assign one person, we still need to inform the other one if there are any changes on the budget that they already know about.
So we're not necessarily relinquishing control.
No.
What the other person is basically doing is the administrative duties of managing the money. Not that they've taken away the decision-making powers of the couple, and that should never be the space in which a couple finds themselves. And you've touched a little bit on it to say the communication around finances is so critical in a marriage. Why is that so? What does that lead to if we don't communicate openly about our finances?
Money is a very sensitive part of who we are. In fact, money is almost an extension of who we are, because money gives us access to anything we want or desire. So that's why it is critically important. In fact, we are told that most of the highest divorces that happens because of finances, the challenges around finances, and because of how sensitive people are on money. And that's why the priorities and the order of things that we do in a budget, both of us must agree upon. And then the rest must be communicated. If nothing has changed this month, then that's fine. I always encourage couples to say, after you've budgeted, there must be money allocated to each for spending, so that there shouldn't be one person who says, oh, you know, I need money for this. No, each one must have money that they spend on their own.
Independently.
And one other issue, which is a principle that is important on managing money, and we must also have a limit on how much a person can spend without communicating with the other person.
Okay.
So that we avoid surprises.
Yes.
Which is surprise, a new bedroom suit. A surprise. Because sometimes these surprises can surprise the budget.
Yes.
I know of one friend who got so much excited on a wife's birthday and bought the wife a car.
Yes.
He was very excited, but the surprise was too much for the budget. 3 months later, they had to return the car because the surprise was not in line with the budgeting.
So it's not that we mustn't have dreams or aspirations to do good things for our partners or when we are in married relationships.
Yeah.
It's that we need to communicate sometimes, and that if we do want to do a nice big surprise, we will have to be saving our independent earnings or our independent budgets on the side.
Yes.
So now we've been happily married, we're managing our budget, and God has blessed us with a bundle of joy.
Yes.
We call them bundles of joy.
Yes.
Bundle of joy now needs to go to school. A bundle of joy is walking and talking.
Yes.
And bundle of joy needs tax money.
Yes.
Or needs, or has decided that we've decided that we want to start teaching our bundle of joy about money.
Yes.
How early is it? Or how soon is too soon to teach a child about money management?
From as early as possible, because, as we said, money is critical. For our own. As much as we teach them health and teach them spiritual things, we need to teach them about how to manage money. And from little things, if you think about it, it is my responsibility as a father to buy toys and to buy bicycles and whatever. But if one of my boys wants a bicycle, but I was going to buy the bicycle, but I decided to change it this way. I said, you do some chores, you wash the car every week. Yes. Obviously, he could wash the car for nothing because he's my son. But I said, for every time you wash a car, you're going to have 50 or 100 rand. And you are going to save it for the bicycle that you want and get in December. So already I'm building a culture of saving. And also, you can imagine the joy when he takes out his savings in December and go and buy that bicycle. He feels achievement as a person. It's not just a gift from the father. It's what I have done as an individual and as a child. So things like that are critical in order to teach them the value for money and the idea of saving. Because if we just becomes like a bank that never ends. Every time they want this, we give them this. They never learn to see the value of money.
What should be taught to children then about the money management as well? So now you've instilled an idea of savings.
Yes.
You've instilled a system of reward and earning.
Yes.
Is there anything else that we can teach them about money management at that age before they become single adults who then have to start that cycle that we were discussing earlier? Yes.
So I think it's true. We are teaching them the value, the idea that you must work for your money. As Christian parents, we extend to say the money that you have, you need to return tithe. As much as the family in their own budgeting have got a tithe allocated there, even you, remember this comes from God. 10% saving, and to see this little one with the envelopes going to church from there. It's a wonderful experience to see that you are not actually teaching them money, but you're teaching them who is the owner, where does it come from, where do we get this money from, and it's from God. And those principles attached to that. And then issues of giving. Yes. Teach them that, it's not selfishness, that it's only about me and me alone. There is another friend who does not have a toy. Can you use your own expenses to buy them a little toy for your cousin or whatever? Those kind of issues, because you will realize one of the main important things that you realize in money and issues that there's bigger blessing in giving than in receiving. Yes. And those principles must also be taught to the children.
Some parents struggle with how much to tell their children, and other parents feel that it's oversharing when they do tell their children that they are having financial difficulties. What would your advice be in, should the family be going through budgetary constraints based on what they have done, the economy has just gotten tough, or someone has lost their job? How much should be communicated to children so that they can also learn about the other side of money management?
One of the things that I always say to parents is that many of us as parents, children come to you and says, I need this, whether it's for school, I need this. And when the parent does not have money, the parent will either go and borrow, steal, or whatever they do to get the money and give to the child. But I say to parents, next time when the child comes up and he doesn't have money, say to the child, I don't have money. I am actually broke. But me and you, we're going to kneel down and pray and ask God to provide. And by so doing, you're actually drawing the children to the secret of your own power, your connection with God, who is the provider. And God does not want to disappoint little children. And after you kneel down and pray, and God comes through, and the child can be able to say, look here, Daddy, God provided. So then we are actually moving away from me as a provider, but God in heaven as the one who provides for us as a family and who provides for you and all your daily things that you need from day to day. So it is important that as parents, we become open and honest with the children, but more so get them to connect with God.
Mr. Ravhengani, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the wisdom and the advices that you've given us. Sure. I hope that once I have my own children, I'll be able to be as wise as you are. Sure. Ladies and gentlemen at home, you've learned so much today. There's so many different aspects and facets to which we just need to apply our minds and instill clear principles around money management, not only for ourselves, but also in our marriages, and then also translate that and pass that on to our children so that they are also able to be financially responsible. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.